Hey everyone, it's Ellie and Holly here from Feminine Warrior Mindset. We're here today to talk about hurdle number 4, which came out of our research with over 50 women in tech about the key hurdles that are stopping them from advancing in their career. So hurdle number 4 was there's a lack of women leaders as role models in tech, and this is the impact that it has. So if we think about what that means is there's not many female leaders in tech itself. So a lot of women can't always see themselves in those senior leadership roles. But when they are in those roles, what we found from our research was a lot of them weren't very authentic because they were told to emulate a male leader. So they might become more aggressive, or they might not be themselves. So it means they're not being seen as authentic and not being as trustworthy. So what this meant was a lot of female leaders didn't want to do that because they didn't want to wear a mask and progress because it just wasn't worth it with all the politics and the stress that came with it. So it also meant that a lot of women had a lot of ambiguity because they couldn't see their career path forward in their careers. So they might just stop where they are and not even progress, or they might leave tech altogether. So one of the solutions was, how do we actually start to see some authentic female leaders that we actually can see ourselves being, rather than, trying to create a very kind of very unclear path forward. So Holly, do you have an example of this from our research that you can tell to kind of bring this to life a little bit?
Yeah, and actually today, Ellie, I think I'm going to need to tell two stories. Because
Yeah.
when we think about like having role models along your career, right? First time manager all the way up to senior leader. Um, the first story is a lady, and of course we've changed names, but the first person I would mention is Janita. And she was having a bit of a hard time setting boundaries, had some sort of burnout symptoms. And so her leader said, Janita, you should just be like Anna. She just steamrolls over everyone, and she just doesn't take no for an answer. Or when she says no, nobody would say anything to her. And so for Janita, this just didn't feel authentic because basically this was not a role model for her. And she didn't really like it when she interacted with Anna. So it didn't work all the way around. She didn't see herself being that way authentically. And then as we get up in our interviews, we talk to very senior women as well. In fact, we talked to Vivica, who was in the C-suite, had a very successful career, oversaw an entire product area, went on to be CEO at several other startups. However, at times she was very authentic to herself. She was told, on a leadership assessment that she had a lot of empathy. She would insert herself. However, unfortunately, the peer group would tell her, no, don't do that. That's not what we want to talk about. In fact, be more like Peter. He doesn't talk as much in the meetings. So in her own being authentic, she had to sort of like tamper it down. And so, of course, this is quite challenging, not only for her, but for other women who are looking up to see, like, well, how is Vidica conducting herself? She didn't have the agency to be fully who she was, even though she tried. So it's
Yeah.
quite complicated, these stories, aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. They're multi-layered.
Yeah. And Ellie, what do you think could be a good rewrite for this for both organizations and individuals?
Absolutely. So a lot of organizations, we can start to look at what is effective leadership traits look like. So at the moment, it's still very male dominated. It's very much around competition, around results, around getting the job done at all costs, which impact people, right? So how do we start to, and it's not about male versus female, but it's about how do we look at what does effective leadership traits look like? So bringing in empathy, bringing in listening, looking at how do we become more effective at communicating with our people, and how do we also start to look at more balance in the leadership roles as well, so that you're not just looking at command and control, but more of a shared workload. So once we start to look at that, we can then start to say, well, then what does this look like? How do we start to build these competencies in each of the leaders throughout? So the broken rung research, which we've talked about in terms of the McKinsey in past videos, we could start to do that from when people get their first leadership role. So then each of the layers of leadership, it really starts to infiltrate and really improve that culture. And then secondly, as well, is really that kind of authenticity and focus on authenticity. So how do we start to get leaders to be as effective as they can be without wearing a mask? So not being like Barbara, not being like Janita, but being yourself in how you're conducting yourself, because that authenticity is magnetic, it's attractive for people. So once we start to do that, people will then have more psychological safety to feel safe, to be effective, and they'll be a lot more motivated in what they're doing. And there's so many more strategies that we discuss in our white paper. And I think please let us know if you want a copy of that or if you want a discussion about how this could look. But anyways, thank you so much for tuning in today, and we will be sharing another video soon. Bye.